you ever read over the description of the New Jerusalem in toward the end of Revelation? I'm working on a book on Revelation, and I kind of nerded out on this size of this thing that it's talked about. So I kind of some of my side projects are writing sci-fi. And so I've spent a lot of time thinking about gravitational forces and forces of thrust and, planetary mechanics and stuff like that. And so I kind of put this verse through my just kind of the process I follow when I'm thinking about a sci-fi story and like, would it actually work? Because I like sci-fi that kind of leans more toward hard sci-fi that really could work in the real universe. And so here's what the verse says. This is Revelation 21:16. It says, and so this is like at the very end, it's talking about the eternal home of believers, and it calls it the New Jerusalem. And here's what it says. It says, the city is laid out as a square, and its length is as great as the width. And he measured, so there's an angel measuring it to show him the size. And he measured the city with the measuring rod, 1,500 miles in this translation. Its length and its width and its height are equal. So you can imagine a cube. It'd be either a cube or it could technically be a pyramid, but a cube really seems to make more sense. Okay, so you've got a cube, 1,500 miles. Now, when you're just reading your Bible, you can kind of just skip over that. But what I want to do is I want to read what I wrote to you. I don't know that this will actually make it into the final book because it's kind of just a total detour, But I just started thinking through this and I kind of got carried away, so I wanted to share it with you. The New Jerusalem is described as a massive city with its length, width, and height each measuring 1,500 miles. To put that into perspective, this is larger than most countries and covers an entire an area comparable to a majority of the United States. It is unlike anything ever seen in human history. No city has ever come close to one side of this structure, not to mention being stacked 1,500 miles high. So what I'm getting at there is it says it's a city. It doesn't just say that it's a country, where there's like wide open spaces. It calls it a city. So that seems significant. And it is huge. And and by the way, it's volumetric space. It's not just flat plane space like we're used to. We live on this surface of the planet. But this thing seems to have, volumetric space. So you got to think in cubic miles. Nobody thinks in cubic miles. Who would think about anything in that way? But that's the way you have to think about this. So the space afforded in New Jerusalem will be about 3.4 billion cubic miles. We don't know the population that will live within the holy city, but even at an average rural population density, the New Jerusalem could comfortably house more than the entire human population that has ever lived on earth with room to spare, and could be filled with hundreds of trillions of people at a more modern urban population density. So for that first number, I calculated it, but I live in East Texas, and we're kind of a more rural place, small towns, some cities, but small towns largely. And so the population density is low, usually, a number of acres per person, something like that. And so on that number, you can get billions of people into this holy city. But if you go to the population density of like Tokyo or New York, it is hundreds of trillions of people that you could fit in this kind of space. If you're assuming that, the cubic, that volumetric space. So it is immense. Okay. At the immense scale of 1,500 miles per side, if its construction were attempted under the known laws of physics, the New Jerusalem could not maintain a cubic shape using any materials known to science. The sheer mass would generate gravitational forces comparable to a small moon. I mean, it really is the size of a planetoid, a small moon. Inevitably compelling the structure towards spherical equilibrium as its outer portions collapse inward. As far as we understand physics, that's why planets are spherical, is because gravity pulls everything towards a center point, you know. So this New Jerusalem is more than big enough for that to happen. We see much smaller spheroid structures in space than what we're seeing in this New Jerusalem. So it definitely would be compelled, I guess you could say, to be spheroid. It's trying to get spherical equilibrium. There are a few explanations for a stable square or possibly cube-shaped city of these dimensions, but all of them would have to be supernatural, you know. So like, there's explanations for these things, but like, there's no explanation based on current laws of physics. We don't have any materials that can do this, not even carbon nanotubes or, you know, any kind of thing that we're aware of. No structure can stand up to this kind of these kind of forces. Even more astounding, the city's height also measures 1,500 miles. Okay, so if it's cube, its height 1,500 miles. While it may not be a perfect cube, we don't know. Like I said earlier, it could be pyramid. Who knows? It's unimaginable scale, and just for some reference, our atmosphere extends. I think our base atmosphere extends 62 miles, and then the is it the thermosphere, I think, is 300 and something miles up. And then the exosphere kind of continues really, really thin for a few thousand miles. So, but that's considered outer space for, you know, astronauts or whatever. So this New Jerusalem would, if it were on the Earth today, I mean, it would ruin the Earth if it sat on the Earth today. It would ruin the tides. It would pull the moon out of orbit probably. But if it sat on the Earth today, it would extend into outer space by a very large margin. Our atmosphere would be kind of just like down, you know, less than a third of it. So for physical perspective, if the city were a solid mass placed on Earth, it would, I just said this, it would disrupt the planet's tides and orbit, especially if constructed with dense materials like gold, which it says it's made of, you know, the streets are gold and stuff. Its immense weight would destabilize Earth's gravitational balance, potentially pulling the moon out of orbit. Clearly, this city exists within some different kind of, you know, system here. The city is also described as coming down out of heaven and descending. 2 times it says this. Never says that it comes to rest on the new earth. It's always described as in motion, okay? So we know that it's mobile. It's mobile. It can move. But here is the astounding thing about it. To move that mass, that size of a thing, would take an unfathomable amount of energy. I mean, you're talking like burning, you know, star level energy to move a thing like this. And so I did some calculation. Okay, so considering its mass, if it were coming down at a typical orbital velocity, okay, so it's described as descending or coming down out of heaven. If it were coming down at a typical orbital velocity, the retro-thrust is like, if you've seen it, like a SpaceX launch, the rocket comes back down, the first stage of the rocket comes back down, and it's burning in reverse. It's shooting its thrusters in reverse. That's a retro rocket, kind of a reverse rocket, and that's to slow down its motion toward the planet. Because if it doesn't, it's going to smash into the Earth. So if it were coming down at a typical orbital velocity, the retrothrust required to halt such a mass, to prevent it from colliding with the planet the size of Earth, would require more energy than could be produced by a nuclear arsenal 1 trillion times greater than the one the human race has so far manufactured. Just slowing this city down would be enough energy to destroy the planet. Okay, so it's descending. It's coming down out of the heavens. You know, it's coming down. It's descending, and for it to slow down under our current our current understandings of thrust and physics, it'd blow the Earth up just on its on its insertion burn. It would completely incinerate the Earth and kill everything, and probably knock the Earth out of its orbit. I mean, the forces here that would be required to do just what it's saying it is going to do in these few verses they're unimaginable. Now, some have noticed this and they just take a non-literal approach to this, say, oh, it must be figurative. I don't, though. I take it literally. I mean, I think this is literally going to be the home of believers into forever. And so you might say, well, what's the point? I mean, like, why have all this stuff that just is physically impossible as far as we know? Our best science, our best engineering would say, no, that's impossible. Well, here's what I think. Here's what I wrote as the possible kind of, maybe one of the points. Not the only point, but one of the points. Maybe the point is that this city is impossible without God's divine intervention. Its shape, its size, its materials, its location and structure, they shouldn't work. It shouldn't work within the laws of physics. If the laws of physics are still the same in the new creation, and by the way, they may not be, they could all be changed. But if the laws of physics are still going to be the same in the new creation, and they might be, it would be a continual reminder that God is powerful and presently working to hold together his creation, including the New Jerusalem. The mere shape, size, and structure of the city are miraculous. They just have to be miraculous. It has to be a miracle. That's a miracle if the laws of physics and material sciences are going to be the same in that new cosmos. So it's awesome to think that we, if you're a believer, that we will live in a miracle city forever. It's pretty cool. Thanks for indulging my nerdiness, and I had fun. I hope you did too.